Hey, this is English 201.0 week 5, part 9, and I think we're going to wrap up this section of the story right now, which is nice. Um, his father is just, I think his father's looking for an excuse to attack Gregor. I think his son has been turned into a cockroach, and he's just looking for the chance to fuck this kid up. Um, because he's angry, and that's what he, I mean, that's, he's a violent man, I think. He probably did not even know himself what he had in mind, but nonetheless, he lifted his feet unusually high. Gregor was amazed at the enormous size of the soles of his boot, but he wasted no time with that. He knew full well, right from the first day of his new life, that his father thought it was necessary to be extremely strict with him. Um, so for starters, what's one of the things that's funny is that Gregor's father treats Gregor's going to turn into like a cockroach or something or a bug, but the father treats him like a bug. Like he pulls out a newspaper in the first part and tries to, it seems like he's going to smack him with it like you would a bug. Now he's got his shoe up high like he's going to step on it, which doesn't seem to make a ton of sense since Gregor's quite large now. But the idea is that he really treats him like the bug that he is. He's actually ready to hit him with a newspaper and stomp on him with a boot. Um, okay. I want to talk about something ironic that is difficult to see. This is something my students have a really hard time with. Most people have a hard time. It's not my students, it's everybody. I'm just going to kind of tell you about it. And I'm just going to tell you this. I'm going to say some things, and if you don't get it, don't worry about it. It's completely fine. It's not a big deal. When Kafka read this story to his friends, they laughed. They laughed really hard. They laughed so hard that they had to stop reading the story. Um, you're probably shocked by that. Everybody nowadays is shocked by that because it doesn't seem very funny. It's not a funny story. It's incredibly sad. Everything I've been going over is massively depressing. Um, Depressing and funny are normally opposites because laughter brings happiness and depression is the opposite of happiness. But somehow, I think Kafka is able to do both. I think in particular, this scene where Gregor is fighting with his father is funny. I want you to picture it a little bit like a cartoon. Again, Gregor's about to get hit with an apple that will lodge in his back and that will hurt him until he dies. Of wounds related maybe to the apple wound. But like, when you picture it, like his father's like, he got his big boot out and he's ready to stomp on this cockroach. There's something weirdly funny about this. If you can't see it, that's okay. One thing that's one of the things that makes humor is absurdity. Like if something absurd or ridiculous or random happens, it makes us laugh because it's so because irony. There's a contrast between what's normal and what we expect and the random crazy thing that happens. So there is a bit where Gregor one day he was turned into a giant cockroach. Like that's so crazy and so abnormal, so opposite of the normal flow of life that there is something funny about it in an absurd kind of way. Family Guy often has jokes that revolve around absurdity, just something so crazy happening. This is a little bit like that. Now I realize it's super depressing, but just picture this like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, um, and tell me if you don't think this is maybe a little bit funny. They went round the room several times without anything decisive happening, even without giving the impression of a chase, as everything went so slowly. Gregor remained all this time on the floor, largely because he feared his father might see it as especially provoking if he fled onto the wall or ceiling. Whatever he did, Gregor had to admit um, he certainly wouldn't be able to keep this running for long. He certainly would not be able to keep up this running about for long. As each step his father took, he had to carry out countless movements. He became notably short of breath. Now, as he lurched about in his efforts to muster the strength he could for running, he could hardly keep his eyes open. His thoughts were too slow. Okay, I'm going to skip down here. This is where I read the wrong quote. I need to go a little lower here. Then, right beside him, lightly tossed, something flew down and rolled in front of him. It was an apple. Then another one immediately flew at him. Gregor froze in shock. There was no longer any point in running, as his father had decided to bombard him. He had filled his pockets with fruit from the bowl. On the sideboard now, even without taking the time for careful aim, he threw one apple after another. These little red apples rolled about on the floor, knocking into each other as if they had electric motors. An apple thrown without um, an apple thrown without much force glanced against Gregor's back without doing any harm. Another one, however, immediately and it hit him. But do you see how ridiculous that is? That his father is like gonna stomp on the kid, and he's like throwing apples at him. It's just, and the apples are like bouncing. It's like they have electric motors because the apples are bouncing everywhere, like a pool table or something. Or it's ridiculous. The apples are rolling all over the place. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you picture it like a cartoon, I hope you can see it's kind of funny in a kind of Tom and Jerry sort of Animaniacs-y kind of way. Like it's a It's a potentially funny kind of violence that we associate with cartoon characters who attack each other. Um, and then there's the irony that Gregor gets really injured, and it's the combination of absurdly funny and ridiculous with tragic. That's one thing that makes Kafka interesting. That's the biggest irony of all, is that it's both funny and sad. That it's both ridiculous and real serious. Um, very few people, very few artists are able to do that. The only other person I can think of who does that well is my favorite filmmaker, a guy named David Lynch. If you take film class with me next semester, the entire semester is about him. Actually, if you like Kafka, you'll like film class. If you don't like Kafka, you might not like film class. You might. I mean, some people take film class anyway, not because they expect to like the movies, but because they like taking classes with me because they're used to me. With me, you know what you get. All my classes are sort of the same. They're all like this. Cool. Okay, good. I'm going to talk a little bit about overreading and metaphors now, because this is one of those moments where professors often say something and students often roll their eyes. And actually, I got to tell you, I'm almost with the students on this and not the professors, because this is something I kind of maybe want to roll my eyes at. I have heard people say that the reason that Gregor's father throwing apples, and again, he's just throwing whatever fruit happens to be nearby, but Gregor's father throwing apples was put there by Kafka because apples are a symbol of sin. God the Father in the Garden of Eden. If you know your sort of Judeo-Christian Genesis Bible shit, the story of in the Bible, God creates Adam and Eve, and he tells them you can do whatever you want in paradise, but just don't eat any of the fruit off that tree. And then they do. And then he's like, "Ha! I told you not to do that." And he punishes them and throws them out of paradise, and that's where death and sin enter the world. And then there's punishment. Adam has to work. He used to get all his food for free. Now he has to work. It's labor and death and bad things have been put into the world. And that's the Genesis story of Adam and Eve. Um, Interestingly, nowhere in the Bible does it say that it's an apple. That's not in the Bible. It's one of those things people think they know that they don't know. It does not say it's an apple. It just says fruit. The original just says fruit. Now, people had to paint that, and painters in the Renaissance Europe and medieval Europe or whatever, they chose apples, and as a result, everybody talks about the apple in the Bible. By the way, that apple is the apple of knowledge of good and evil. It's the apple of knowledge. There's also a long-standing association of give a teacher an apple, because apples are associated with knowledge. An apple with a bite out of it, just like Adam and Eve took a bite out of the apple and they gained knowledge that they shouldn't have. Because God wanted to keep them innocent and pure, that they gain knowledge. That's also why iPhones, the symbol is an apple. The company that makes iPhones is called Apple, and it's an apple with a bite out of it, because the idea is that computers give you knowledge, just like the bite of the apple from Adam and Eve give people knowledge. Apples are associated with teachers, knowledge. So apples are a metaphor for knowledge, but also apples are a metaphor for sin. Again, very famous big metaphors. So professors have said this, that like there's something in here about the angry Old Testament God who punishes people and attacks them, which is a big part of the Old Testament. He's like a giant angry toddler who attacks people in the Old Testament. For sometimes he attacks Moses for tries to murder Moses for no fucking reason. Anyway, I'm not going to do that Bible section right now. But so some people have wanted to say, well, the apple has something to do with sin. I actually don't know what I think about that. I don't know. That's a metaphor people try to do at this part, because Gregor's angry, glad father attacking him with apples, and he's suffering for no reason, reminds some people, after taking care of his family, reminds some people of Jesus suffering, and the father seems like the angry Old Testament God who punishes people, and the apple reminds them of sin. There does seem to be something in there that fits, but I don't really know what to do with it, and I don't really like it as a metaphor. It's okay. I don't hate it. I don't really know what to do with it. I don't have a lot to say about it. So I'm going to be on your side on this. Some of my students are like, professors read too much into stories. That seems like a moment where maybe we're overreading. It also feels like a moment where Kafka stuck it in there to mess with people that like to overread. And I realize you're probably rolling your eyes because you've been listening to me talk about this story for hours and you feel like I've been overreading the entire time. What does this have to do with trans people? Like, I'm sure you're like, Professor Clock overreads every day. But I don't know. I just want to point out the controversy on that one. And anyway, we'll move on. All right. I'll see you guys in the next video.